Hi there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, here we go again, part 4 of a workbench build. Okay, well this week's show is going to start off by working on the end caps of the bench. And in this particular process, these end caps are 2.5 inches wide or thick, and they're 4 1/4 wide by various dimensions long. So we're going to have to do that lamination thing. So what we're going to have to do is, just like we did with the legs in the first episode of the show, now we're going to go ahead and laminate 1 1/4 thick pieces together in order to form the thickness that we need for both the end caps on the left and the right of the bench. Well, I've got the boards jointed and resawn and of course thickness planed down to the 1 1/4 inch. Now we're going to take it over to the table saw, and I'd like to have about 1/2 inch of play in these. It's going to be a slippery glue up with this much surface area. So instead of the 4 1/4 that will be their final dimension, what I want to do is maybe go 4 3/4. Give me 1/2 inch of play just to be on the safe side. So over to the table saw, rip them to 4 3/4 inch, and then of course we're going to glue the two pieces up, 2 for each side. And with that, the glue up of the end caps is done. And now we're just going to wait, of course, I guess overnight, until it's dry enough that I can mill it down to its final dimensions. You may have noticed I got the belt replaced in the jointer. Thank goodness. Although I had a lot of fun face planing it by hand and jointing the edges by hand, it's so much easier in this case with the jointer, and it's really nice to be back working with shorter boards again, because those long ones are killer. There is one more long one left to mill and run through that jointer. I'm not looking forward to it, but it is the last one, thank goodness. So from here on in, it's going to be smaller boards. They go so much faster. They're a lot easier on the arms and the shoulders. Yeah, I know, I'm a wuss. Whatever. Anyway, we're going to let this dry up, and I'm going to come back again tomorrow, and we're going to clean them up, cut them down to their final dimensions. And we're back, and we've got the end caps unclamped. Now, just like what we did with the legs and their glue up assembly, we're going to joint the one edge so that it's square to the face, and then we're going to head over to the table saw, and we're going to cut them to their final width of 4 1/4 inches. Once we get that cut and we're happy with that, then I'm going to cut them off, cross-cut them to their final dimension as per the print. Okay, so the end caps are milled to their final length, and what we've got to do now is drill some holes for the hardware. And this is the hardware that we had from the legs and the stretchers from earlier, but the hardware is the similar type, just a smaller size. So what we're going to need is in those end caps some 1 inch Forstner bit holes, 1/2 inch deep, and then we're going to go a 5/8 inch hole through for the rest of it. So I'm going to go ahead and drill those, and then we're going to move on to aligning the end caps. So there's the holes and the counter bores drilled, and like I said, they house the bolts that'll hold these end caps to the main core and to the front skirt, etc., etc. So now we got to dry fit these end caps to the main assembly, and if you don't have a helper for this, you might as well forget it. So go get a helper. So here we've got the left end cap clamped up. This section over here is going to end up being the tool well, but we've got our through holes and our counter bores here, and one here that you can't see in behind this clamp. But what you need to do is transfer the center marks now to the end grain of your core, and then from there we're going to drill a 1/2 inch hole through the core about 3 1/4, 3 1/2 inches. Once we get that drilled, we're going to drill from the underside with a 5/8 hole, and that will accept that round brass nut. Once that's all done, of course, then we can do a test fit and try to bolt it together and just see how it all sort of comes together at that point. So we'll just do a test fit. We have our holes drilled, our 1/2 inch through holes drilled here. We're just going to do a test fit to see how this all kind of bolts together. There's still a lot more to do here on this particular section, but we can at least do a test fit. So there's the one side in, and we'll just get the other side test fit in there. And of course we're going to have some left to right adjustments to do, and there's a lot more to do to these end caps, but for now at least we know the hardware fits. Okay, so I flipped it over and made the necessary adjustments, and now we're sitting pretty much right where we want to be. We've got a few of the boards of our top core. You can see right here there's a little bit of a ridge, probably about a 32nd of an inch, but that's no big deal. When we flatten the top, that'll all be taken away. So now we're going to go ahead and put our end cap on the opposite side. So I don't think you need a video of that, so I'll see you when it's done. So both end caps now are bolted onto the entire core. That is not the final installation, not at all. You can see it here kind of lying in behind me, but let me just show you a picture here so you can sort of get the gist of what we're looking at. The overhang of these end caps is going to end up becoming the tool well, and we're going to get into that a little later. But our next step now is, believe it or not, after all that trouble that we just went through to get these on, we actually have to remove them now. But that'll be tomorrow when I come back to filming, because it's getting late here. And these end caps actually took a lot longer than what I had ever anticipated. So with that, I'm going to leave this for the night, and I'll come back bright and early tomorrow morning, and we'll start up again. Well, we're back at it again this morning, and we have the end caps taken off. And what we need to do now is we need to cut a groove, or a dado, on the inside of each one of these end caps that's going to accept a plywood key, and that key will be glued into this end cap. And what it does is it aligns this end cap where they're just bolted in. There's still the possibility of shifting, and that key is going to eliminate that shifting. So what we need to do is route out a 3/8 of an inch wide groove, or dado, 3/8 of an inch deep, but we want to stop it about 8 inches from the end, because we don't want that groove to show in our tool well. So we're going to go ahead now and route these keys both in the end caps and in the end grain of our top core of the bench. Okay, let me just show you what I've got here. What I've done is I've taken one of the offcuts of maple, and I've checked this edge here to make sure that it's perfectly straight. From there, I've got a 3/8 inch straight bit installed in the router, and I've got it to a depth of 3/8 of an inch. That will cut our keyways. From there, I've used double-sided tape to help to adhere it to the bottom of the base plate, and from the inside of the base plate I've used some number 8 by 1.25" screws and some fender washers just to go through the existing holes in the router plate to adhere this fence. So the way that this is going to work is that this fence is going to ride along the surface of our bench or on the top of our end caps to give us the right alignment. There's a 3/4 inch gap here which will align our 3/8 dados or keyways quite perfectly. So just to be sure, I've taken an old piece of pine and I tried the jig out and I did this one test cut for a keyway, and then on my end cap that I've marked out the keyway on, I've aligned the edge of the board, and just to prove to myself that it worked, I made sure that those lines lined up. So they do, everything looks great, and now I'm going to go ahead and route those keyways, making sure that we don't go through at the end because it'll show, and we don't want to go past. I said 8 inches in. I actually went 8.5 for a little bit of leeway, but we don't want to go past those stop marks that I've added here, simply because it will show in our tool well and it will show in the end cap of our bench. And there we have the keyway routed out in the one end cap. So I'm just going to hold this up to the left side of the bench there, make sure that this is still right, that we didn't go into the tool well. Then I'm going to route the keyway in the other end cap. Well, now we need to cut the groove in the end grain of the bench top here. So the keyway will be cut in the end grain to accept, obviously, the key from the end caps. And it's the same process, same setup, same little makeshift fence, except this time it's going to run like this. And we're going to run it along the top of the bench, stopping at our stop marks. So I'm going to go ahead and route this into the end grain. It's going to be a little tougher route this time, so just remember just to take it slow. And there you can see our keyway is now cut in the end grain. If you take it nice and slow, you shouldn't have any problems. Just, you know, bottom line here is that slow and steady will win the race on this one. You're not in a hurry, so we're just going to go ahead now and do the other side of the bench and route that keyway. So as you saw there, the keyways are cut in both the end caps and in the bench top. Now it's time to cut the keys, and if you don't know what a key is, it's basically a strip of wood. In this case, we're going to use 3/8 inch plywood. The 3/8 coincides with the width of our keyway, and what we're going to need is a few strips of that 3/4 inch wide, 3/8 deep on one keyway, 3/8 deep on the other, allows you 3/4. So 3/4 inch wide out of some 3/8 plywood, and then we're going to dry fit the assembly together and make sure everything fits properly. So here we have the key. In this case, this side is 15 inches long, and the other side I believe was 8 or 9. I don't recall right off the bat. But you just want to do a dry test fit to make sure that it fits snugly into your keyway here, and then get a hold of your end cap and snap that on there, and just make sure that everything lines up, that we're not running into an issue where it doesn't allow for a good fit. And something's not quite lining up there. I can see it's because I put it crooked in this particular keyway. So I'll line this back up in here. You know, it doesn't really fit well into this particular keyway, so I'm going to make adjustments to this, and this of course is why we test fit. It turns out there was just some debris in the keyway hole, so what we'll do is we'll test fit that in there just like we tried to in the first place, and we'll line it up with the keyway on this side, and everything looks like it's going to work out just fine. So at this point in time now, you want to test fit the other side, and then you want to glue the key into the end cap. Do not glue it into your bench, only the end cap. Okay, the keys are glued into the keyways of the end caps. We're going to put them aside now and let them dry, but I just wanted to make sure to let you guys know, clean up the squeeze out while it's still wet on these keys. You don't want that glue interfering later on when you try to pull it all together, and it's much easier to do it at this point in time. It's not like the other glue ups where the table saw was going to cut that piece off anyway. So make sure you clean up the squeeze out. Well, moving on while we wait for those keys to dry up in the end caps, we need to do the outer tool well wall. I'm sure you guys know I've been dreading this one. That's a board just over 7 feet, and we're going to start at the jointer, do the resaw, the thickness plane, cut her down to her final dimensions, and you know what, that's going to take a while, so I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so enough of the tomfoolery. We have that outer tool well piece cut now, and it's cut to length, and before we can carry on with putting that piece into place or any of the other cuts that we need to do, on the right end cap, now that those keys are dried in there, remember that 3/4 dado that we ran, and that was for the tail vise hardware? Well, we now need to extend that right through the end cap. So we need to put that end cap in place and mark for the for that 3/4 dado. So here we can see this is the end cap, and we've just got it sat in place. It's obviously not going to sit flush because that key isn't going to fit all the way in there. But all I'm going to do is stick this ruler in here, and I'm just going to extend the lines here of that 3/4 dado right out to the end like that. And I'm going to do the same on the top, and that will be the line to extend our dado. And I'm just going to cut that by hand by sawing down and basically chiseling it out and extending it that way. We've got the majority of the material cut out of this dado now with the chisel, but I'm going to stop it short because I want to put these end caps onto the bench, and truth be told, we can put them on now. There's only one thing left to do with them, and That is to drill our hole through again because our keys have blocked the hole. So we're just going to get our drill bit and drill right through that key, and then we're going to install all of the end caps back on the bench. So we've got the right side end cap on now, and we're just going to go ahead with a 3/4 chisel and clean this up to extend this dado and level it out with the one that's already there in the core pieces. Okay, we've got this cleaned up now and leveled out with the existing dado over here. So now we can go ahead and put the left end cap on the bench. The next step now is to take that outside tool well wall, and we need to cut a 3/8 wide by 3/8 deep dado starting at 1/4 inch up from the bottom. And this is going to be to accept the tool tray bottom. Well, it's now time to mark and cut the joinery that is going to take this outer tailboard, or sorry, this outer tool well piece and connect it to our end caps. And that is done by dovetails. And of course, the only way I can really see to do this is by hand. And let me tell you, I'm not the best at hand dovetail joinery. In fact, I'm bloody horrible at it. But that's okay. That's what the plans call for, and that is what we're going to do. So we're going to start off with marking this out, and the first thing we're going to mark is the tails. And with the tail markings, of course, we want to put a line here at 1.5 inches in. That will be our inside edge of the tails. We'll just darken that up a bit. And then the edge comes in here at 1/4 inch. So we're just going to mark that 1/4 inch. I'm having a little trouble seeing this here, and that's with my glasses on. So it comes in 1/4 inch. The ends of the tails are 1 3/4. So 1 3/4, 1 3/4, that equals 2. On this end, of course, it will be the same. So we will come in at a 1/4 inch here for the marking, and then 1 3/4 for the tail, which is 2 inches. And what it is a 7-degree dovetail. So I've set my bevel for 7 degrees, and what we'll do now is we will go ahead and mark the tails of these dovetails. So I'm going to go ahead and mark all of these here, and once I get them marked, we're going to cut the tails into this board, and once we get those cut, we'll clamp it on to our end caps and continue by cutting our pins. So there we have our tails marked. So now that we've got those marked, we're just going to go around and scribe a line all the way around here for these tails, and we're going to do it on both sides, and then we're going to start cutting these out. So if you are fairly new to cutting dovetails, it wouldn't hurt for you to mark the waist areas, just so you don't get confused. As well, I've gone around and scribed all of these marks. I can see here that I forgot to scribe these ones, so I'll do that right now. But you just want to put a little scribe mark there to help guide your saw in cutting these tails. So the other problem here, or for me the other dilemma, is I have no proper bench right now, hence I'm in the process of making it. So it's very difficult to clamp this in place and work on these dovetails. The other problem here that I have, that I'm encountering, is normally I like to work flush, looking down at the piece, but unfortunately with this it's too long for me to do that, so I'm gonna have to do this kind of on the side, and that makes it a little difficult as well. Now I don't have a fret saw, so I'll just be using a drill to take out the majority of the material against that line, and then I'll clean it up with a chisel. And there we have the tails cut. Probably not the best job in the world, but then again, like I said, I suck at hand-done dovetails. But what we're going to do now is clamp this board in place, and using the tails that we just cut, we're going to transfer marks onto our end caps to mark out our pins. Well, we've transferred our marks onto here from the tails that we cut, and now we're just going to go ahead with the saw and cut down through our scribed lines just to get the majority of the cutting done on the pins. Well, the next thing we're going to do here is in each one of these saw kerfs, I'm just going to take a card scraper and I'm just going to sever the fibers all the way down. Now, because this is such a large dovetail, I'm not going to go all the way to the back right off the bat. I'm just going to do a little bit just like this, and then what I'm going to do then is I'm going to get a large 1-inch chisel and I'm going to start taking away the majority of the material to make the pins. Now, I've already scribed the edge down along here, so I should just be able to just knock off a little bit of this end piece here, just to give us a shoulder to work from. Just like that. And there's our shoulder right there that we can start working from. I think that in reality here, the angle that I'm working on is a little awkward. So I'm actually going to take these end rails or end caps off and work on them without them being attached to the whole bench. So if you're following along, you might want to do the same. So like I said, we're just going to continue to hack this material out. Just need to drive your chisel down to give yourself your shoulder to work on, and then just line it up and give it a couple cracks, and you'll find that the material comes out relatively easily. You may need to split it to get some of it out, but that's really no big deal. We can get those pieces out relatively easily, and then we're going to carry on cutting these pins, and once we get this material roughed out of here, then we're going to go in and just, without hammering on it, just gently clean it up, and then we're going to fine tune it to the outside board of the tool well. Alright, so we've cleaned it all up there for the pins, and we're just going to give it a test fit here. It fits pretty good. There is a bit of a gap here, and there's a couple small gaps. I'm not so sure that I can really do much about those. It's definitely woodworker error here, but I I'm pleased with it considering my usual results of hand joinery. So I'm going to move on now and do the other side. And now we've tested the joints. Now we just want to make sure everything fits together with the end caps actually bolted onto the bench. And now that we've got those joints in place, we're going to glue them in, tighten up these bolts, clamp it all together, and we'll have to let that dry. And with that, we're going to have to call it quits for this week's video. Over half an hour. Where did that time go? It seemed like we were at 10 minutes and then we start talking about half-blind dovetails on the back, hand cut, and this and that, and next thing you know I was at a half an hour. But that's the way these build videos go. Nothing I can do about it. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. But either way, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'm going to see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.